Nobody puts this on a birthday card. You're 52 years old. You've worked hard, genuinely hard, for the last 3 decades. You've raised kids, maybe paid off a car or two, survived a few rough patches that you don't talk about much. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this quiet assumption that by now, you should feel more financially secure than you do. But you don't. And that gap between where you thought you'd be and where you actually are, that's not just uncomfortable. It's quietly terrifying. Here's the thing nobody says out loud. Your 50s might be the single, most financially dangerous decade of your life. Not because you're failing. Not because you made terrible decisions. But because this decade comes loaded with traps that look completely reasonable on the surface, until they're not. And the worst part? Most of the people who should be warning you are going through the same thing themselves. So let's actually talk about it in this video. We have this cultural story about men in their 50s that's almost romantic. The seasoned provider. The guy who's figured it out. The one who's been around long enough to know better. But that story creates a dangerous silence. Because if you're supposed to have it figured out by now, admitting that you're financially stressed in your 50s feels like a confession of failure. So most men don't talk about it. They manage the appearance of stability while privately feeling like the ground is softer than it looks. And here's what I find genuinely fascinating about this decade. The traps aren't obvious. They don't feel like traps. They feel like responsibility. They feel like love. They feel like reasonable choices that any good man would make. That's what makes them so dangerous. We're not talking about gambling away your savings or buying a sports car on impulse. We're talking about quiet, well-intentioned decisions that compound over time in ways nobody prepared you for. The first trap is what I call the lifestyle lock-in. Somewhere in your 40s, life got more expensive in ways that felt completely justified. Your income grew, so you bought a bigger house. Your kids got older, so the costs got bigger: schools, clothes, phones, activities. You finally started living in a way that matched what you felt you'd earned. And none of that was wrong. But here's the psychology behind it. Our spending adjusts upward very quickly, and it adjusts downward almost painfully. There's actually a term for this. It's called hedonic adaptation on the way up and status loss aversion on the way down. What that means in plain English is, it's easy to get used to more, and it's genuinely psychologically painful to scale back. So by your 50s, your lifestyle has a kind of gravitational pull. It keeps you spending at a certain level not because you're reckless, but because cutting back would feel like losing something. And nobody wants to feel like they're going backwards. The trap is that this lifestyle lock-in quietly eats into the savings window you need most. Because here's the math that stings. The decade between 50 and 60 is statistically one of your highest earning periods. But it's also, for many men, a period of peak spending. And if those two things offset each other completely, you arrive at 60 having earned more than ever and saved less than you needed to. The second trap is supporting everyone but yourself. This one is emotional, and it's the one men talk about the least. In your 50s, you often find yourself financially sandwiched between 2 generations. Your kids, maybe they're in their 20s, maybe they're still in school, maybe they had a setback, need support. And your parents, if they're still alive, might need help too. Medical bills, living arrangements, unexpected costs. And because you love these people, you help. Of course you do. But there's a quiet pattern that happens here. You dip into your savings. You pause your retirement contributions. You tell yourself it's temporary. And then temporary becomes the new normal. I've seen this play out in so many families, and what breaks my heart is that the men doing this aren't being reckless. They're being generous. But generosity, without financial boundaries, doesn't just hurt you. Eventually, it creates the exact dependency you were trying to prevent. If you drain yourself dry in your 50s helping everyone else, who helps you in your 70s? There's a version of financial self-preservation that isn't selfish. It's strategic. And getting clear on that distinction might be one of the most important mindset shifts of this decade. The third trap is the career confidence trap. Here's something almost nobody talks about. The job market in your 50s is not the same as it was in your 30s. And I don't say that to be dark. I say it because pretending otherwise is what gets men blindsided. If you're employed and feel secure right now, that's genuinely great. But the data tells us that men who experience unexpected job loss in their 50s take significantly longer to find comparable work. Sometimes they never fully recover to the same income level. Yet most men in their 50s carry zero financial cushion for this possibility. Not because they're careless, but because psychologically, we associate the need for an emergency fund with being young and unstable. By the time you're 52, you feel like you're past that phase. You're not. The risks are different, but they're still real. And here's the second layer of this. Many men in their 50s are also considering entrepreneurship for the first time, finally chasing the business idea they've been sitting on for 20 years. That instinct isn't wrong. But starting a business at 52 with no financial runway, while simultaneously supporting a family and behind on retirement savings, is a very different risk calculation than starting one at 32. The trap isn't ambition. The trap is ambition without a clear-eyed look at the timing. The fourth trap is the retirement number illusion. Ask most men in their 50s what they need to retire comfortably, and they'll give you a number. Usually around 1 million, 2 million, whatever they've heard. But here's what's missing from that number: healthcare. This is genuinely the most underestimated cost in retirement planning for men. Before Medicare kicks in at 65, if you retire early or lose your employer coverage, healthcare premiums alone can run $800 to $1,500 a month or more, depending on where you live. That's before copays, prescriptions, or anything unexpected. Most retirement calculators people use online either ignore this or dramatically underestimate it. So you hit your target number, feel a wave of relief, and then discover that the number was built on assumptions that don't hold in the real world. Here's the reframe I want to offer you, and I want you to really sit with this for a moment. The financial traps I've just described, they're not character flaws. They're not signs that you've been irresponsible. They are the predictable results of systems that were never designed to explain themselves to you, combined with emotional patterns that are deeply human. The lifestyle lock-in, that's psychology, not weakness. The family support spiral, that's love without a structure to protect it. The career complacency, that's confidence, which in most contexts is a virtue. The retirement number illusion, that's incomplete information, not stupidity. When you stop seeing these as personal failures and start seeing them as patterns, something shifts. Because patterns can be interrupted. Failures feel permanent. Patterns feel solvable. And this matters psychologically, because men in their 50s who feel shame about their financial situation tend to do one of two things. They either freeze completely, too overwhelmed to make any move, or they take a dramatic swing, trying to make up lost time through high-risk investments or drastic decisions. Neither works. The shame is what's driving the behavior, not a clear-eyed assessment of what's actually possible. When you remove the shame, you can see your situation more accurately. And more importantly, you can act on it in a way that's actually proportional to reality. So what does moving forward actually look like? Not in a hustle harder, sacrifice everything way, but in a genuinely sustainable, realistic way. The first thing is running an honest audit of where your money is actually going. Not to shame yourself, but because most men in their 50s genuinely haven't done this in years. You'd be surprised how much clarity comes from just seeing it on paper or a screen, without judgment. The second thing, and this is harder emotionally, is having explicit, honest conversations about money with the people you're supporting. Not cutting them off, not becoming cold, but being clear about what's sustainable and what isn't. Those conversations feel uncomfortable before you have them, and almost always produce relief after. The third thing is building or rebuilding your emergency reserve. Even if it's imperfect, even if it's 3 months instead of 6, having that cushion changes how you carry yourself at work. It changes your decision-making. It removes a layer of low-grade anxiety that's been sitting in your chest for longer than you probably realize. And the fourth thing is getting a real number. Not a magazine number, not a headline number, but an actual, personal retirement projection that includes healthcare, housing, and inflation. This doesn't have to cost you anything. Many nonprofit financial counseling services offer this for free. But knowing your actual number, even if it's uncomfortable to look at, gives you something to aim at. Vague dread is always worse than a clear, specific challenge. I want to end with something that I genuinely believe. Your 50s are not too late. Not even close. There's this cultural narrative that says if you haven't figured out money by now, you've missed your window. And that narrative is quietly cruel, because it stops people from doing the things that would actually help them. The reality is that a man who is 52 today, in reasonable health, statistically has 30 or more years ahead of him. What you do with the next 5 to 10 years financially can reshape the entire rest of that arc. Not through some dramatic transformation, but through consistent, clear-eyed, non-panic decisions made from a place of self-awareness rather than shame. The men who navigate their 50s well aren't the ones who had everything figured out. They're the ones who got honest earlier than everyone else, who asked for help before the pressure became a crisis, who decided that protecting their own financial future was an act of love for the people who depend on them, not a betrayal of them. You don't need to be perfect to get this right. You just need to start seeing it clearly. And maybe, just maybe, that starts with a conversation like this one. If this video made you see your 50s a little differently, even just one thing, go ahead and like it. It genuinely helps more men who need it most to find this conversation. And if you want to keep thinking clearly about money, life, and the decisions that actually matter, subscribe to Weston Wealth. We don't do hype here. Just honest, grounded conversations about building a financial life that actually fits the one you're living.